Hey everyone, this video is a case study on Sergio Rojas and his process for understanding the Chromium open source project. I have known Sergio for many years. We have collaborated on many open source contributions in the past, and I have personally learned a lot from those collaborations with him. The most recent project Sergio has been contributing to is Chromium, which is the open source engine behind Google's Chrome web browser, as well as Microsoft's Edge browser, as well as a variety of other browsers. What is uniquely challenging about this open source project is how large it is. Downloading the source code of Chromium required 100 gigabytes of space on Sergio's machine. He had to get a special computer just to run this thing locally so that he can contribute to it. So Chromium is an extremely large and complex system. And so I was curious to know what was Sergio's initial process for getting his head around the system. We're trying to understand such a large code base and such a complex system. So what you're about to see is a conversation with Sergio where I interviewed him, and my goal was to learn, what did he do? What was his process? And then more generally, we're going to learn how we can leverage AI to replicate what Sergio did and to generalize it for any open source project so that you can learn how to use AI to help accelerate your own learning curve for understanding any open source project, especially if it has a large code base, and especially at that beginning phase where you don't know much or anything at all about the project. So let's dive in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sergio Rojas. Sergio, I have a question for you. You seem to have a pretty decent grasp of how complex the system is for Chromium. I want to give some steps to our audience here. What can they do to begin to understand the system, like the system architecture or the systems level understanding of their project? How did you, what was your first step, Sergio? How did you begin this process?
Just by going to the project's website. It has several, like for this example, Chromium, I just went to the website and just started clicking on links. And by all the links, this was like the most useful one. It's a slide deck, which is this one. It's just showing you, it's like a presentation on the life of a Chromium developer. I guess the most important slide was slide 24, which was a link to the design doc, and it was showing the diagram of the web browser Chromium and how it was showing the components for the web browser.
Okay. So let me just clarify a couple of things. Chromium had a website. Not all projects are going to have a full-blown website like that. But one place that you should be able to guarantee you find something is the README of the project. Can we just show the README for Chromium?
Yeah.
You basically just go to the GitHub page for Chromium, and there'll be a README file there. Every project on GitHub has a README file, so when in doubt, you can start there. There you go. And even the README here points you to the website. The project website is located there, chromium.org. Okay, the second thing I'll point out is you eventually found a diagram. Can we look at the diagram again?
Yeah.
Okay. So the diagram, to me, this seems kind of complicated, Sergio. How long did it take you to understand this thing?
4 hours just reading this one page for each of the components explanation.
Okay, 4 hours. To me, that actually sounds low. I would have expected longer than 4 hours. I probably would have thought like 4 days or something to understand this thing. But so I'm gonna just point out a couple of potential pitfalls that may happen. Number one is your open source project may not have a nice diagram like this. I would say most of them don't. And then the second pitfall is even if it does have a nice diagram, it might be really complicated. It might be hard for you to understand what it's saying. And so the next thing that I want to talk about then is what do you do in that case? For both of these pitfalls, the next thing we can recommend that we're going to recommend can help. And this is where the AI can be very helpful. So, Sergio, can you go to your coding IDE? I want to try out a script here.
Yeah.
Okay. This is your IDE? Interesting. What IDE is this?
Cursor.
This is Cursor? My cursor doesn't look
Yeah.
anything like. Oh, you have a different color scheme. That's why. Okay. So I see you're using the Cursor IDE, and for the audience, you don't have to use Cursor. You could use VS Code. The main thing you do need is the Copilot extension, or some other equivalent AI tool that has context of your code base. So let's look at the script. We already ran it to save some time. I'm just going to read it out loud. So I want to develop a systems level understanding of the project. Let's start simple. Let's treat Chromium as a black box, but let's treat Chromium like a black box. Tell me what is the primary input into Chromium and what is the primary output. Then generate the code to represent the black box system as a mermaid diagram. So we're going to find out what we mean by mermaid diagram. Can we see what did Chromium produce here? So it described the primary input. It described the output. Let's skip ahead to the diagram. Can we see the code it generated for the diagram?
Yeah. It's in this slide.
Okay. So here's what a mermaid diagram is. The visual representation of it is on the right. So it's a diagram, but it's generated as code. So what the AI will output is the code on the left. And then you can go to a visualizer website. Here, Sergio is using mermaidrender.com. You just paste in the generated diagram and it'll visualize it for you. And so let's take a look at what it says, Sergio. On the left, you've got the inputs. And then what is the main input there? So you got a URL, right? So you type a URL. And then you got Chromium as a black box. And then on the right, you have the output, which is the completed frames or the page pixels. So this makes a lot more sense to me, Sergio. When I use Chrome, I type in a URL as input. Chromium does its thing. That's the black box. And then out comes all the pixels for the web page. So this is probably where I would start for my first iteration at a system diagram. Okay. Now, the next question is, what do we do with this? Is there a way to somehow bridge this to the original complex diagram? And here is where we asked another question to the AI, a follow-up question. Let's actually switch over to my screen, Sergio. So here's what I did. I uploaded the original complex diagram from the documentation. And then I also provided the simplified black box mermaid diagram here. And I said, yeah, given this simplified mermaid diagram for Chromium and given the more complex diagram attached as an image, help me understand how the simple diagram relates to the complex diagram. For example, what is the resource dispatcher host? So I wanted to know the very first one here in the top left. What is, even that doesn't make sense to me. So I wanted to know, what is that with respect to the original diagram? Like what part of the simple black box diagram corresponds to this, the resource dispatcher host? And so it gave me some answers here. And I'm not going to go through it too much, but it was helpful. So one thing I hope you're seeing is that you can work with the AI in this back and forth way to gradually help you understand the systems level picture of what's going on in the larger code base. Okay, and by the way, this works even if you don't have the original diagram. Maybe you just skip this particular step, but you could still generate the simpler mermaid diagram even if the documentation didn't give you any diagram to start with.